So we are going to talk about faith today. And let us go to John 8. Father, bless this word, Lord God. Bless this church, Lord Jesus. As we would sit at your table and have communication and sup with you, Lord God, we ask that you fill it and you be a blessing and nourishing to our faith, Lord God. In your holy precious name I pray. John 8:1. Jesus went unto the Mount of Olives, and early in the morning he came again into the temple, and all the people came unto him, and he sat down and taught them. And the scribes and Pharisees brought unto him a woman taken in adultery, and when they had set her in the midst, they say unto him, Master, this woman was taken in adultery in the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned, but what sayest thou? This they said, tempting him, that they might have to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down and with his finger wrote on the ground, as though he heard them not. What we're going to look at today is how our faith works, right? And here, we've got a very interesting situation. We have this woman who is found literally in adultery, literally doing things that even the Old Testament law said you shouldn't be doing. And she's brought, dragged and kicking into the temple. And I don't know about your faith, right? But I've been around churches for a while, and I've met a lot of people. And some of them are brought to church, dragged and kicking, right? And that eventually some of them come to the faith. But we're going to look at faith and what was going on here with this woman beforehand. Because this woman beforehand, right, if she truly had faith, probably shouldn't have been sleeping around. So when they continued asking him, he lifted him up himself and said unto them, He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience, went out one by one, beginning at the eldest, even unto the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. And when Jesus had lifted up himself, and saw none but the woman, he said unto her, Woman, where are those thine accusers? Hath no man condemned thee? She said, No man, Lord. And Jesus said unto her, Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. See, this woman came to faith through her circumstances. This wasn't a person actively seeking Christ. In fact, this was a person who was completely opposite. Her faith was none, right? If anything, it was contrary and destroying her faith, what could have been there. And what the church does, and the church's faith, is drags her in there to stone her. And Christ says, if you don't have sin, go ahead and cast the first stone. And the condemnation and the heaviness on this heart of believers in their faith is enough to save this woman. And he says, Go and sin no more. I do not condemn you either. And here we have a lot of faith working, right? First, we have the faith of this congregation, of this temple, who says, let's deal with sin this way. Then we have her faith that is void. She is one who comes dragging and kicking. I'm sure she wasn't like, okay, let's go to the temple so he can murder me. I'm sure that's not how she approached the situation, fresh out of a lustful bed. And then we have Christ's faith. He says, I don't condemn you, but I need you to do this in my walk. So that is one way faith works here. We heard the word today and what's going to go out and what's going to happen. And we each talk about Christ in people's lives. And there's a whole myriad of ways in which it can be received. It can be received like one kicking and screaming, or not. Let's look at someone else's faith. Let us look at John 5. 5:1. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is at Jerusalem, by the sheep market, a pool, which is called in Hebrew tongue Bethesda, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of impotent folk, of blind, halt, withered, waiting for the moving of water. For an angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water. Whosoever the first after the troubling of the water stepped in was made whole of whatsoever disease he had. And a certain man was there which had an infirmity 38 years. So this is a pretty interesting scene, right? So we've got this pool, and at this pool, an angel comes down every so often and touches it. And the first person in, lottery ticket to everything you possibly need. God's mercies in this world. He doesn't talk about anybody else here at this point. We're going to start reading about this man who's had this infirmity for 38 years. But we don't know anything about anybody else, right? All we know is that they have to be by this pool and they put their whatever in the water and there it goes. We don't know what or who they believe in. We know that there is faith, but we don't know in what or in who. And the second thing is that it's one. All these people, he says, it's a great multitude, but only one gets touched. When Jesus saw him lie and knew that he had been now long in that case, he saith unto him, Wilt thou be made whole? The impotent man answered him, Sir, I have no man, when the water is troubled, to put me into the pool, but while I am coming, another steppeth down before me. Jesus saith unto him, Rise, take up thy bed, and walk. This man's got faith, right? And that faith is that if I can make it to that water, I'll be touched. But it's interesting what this guy says when Jesus says, Will you be made whole? He said, I have no man to take me. Two things. One, if I'm something for 38 years, I might just sit by that pool on the edge and just get sunburned until the next time it happens so I can be there. I don't know if I want it that bad. This guy seems like he didn't. In fact, what he says is, I have no man to take me there. My faith is limited to, I have no one to drag me to the pool to get me there first. Christ stands there and says, you don't need someone to drag you through your faith. It's an action. His choice is to stand there and say, I gotta have the man. Christ says, I am the man. We're going to read further here, and notice that he says, Rise, take up thy bed, and walk. There's more to be done here. And immediately the man was made whole, and took up his bed, and walked, and on the same day was the Sabbath. The Jews therefore said unto him that was cursed, Is it the Sabbath day? Is it not lawful for thee to carry thy bed? He answered them, He that made me whole, the same unto me, take up thy bed and walk. Then asked they him, What man is that said unto thee, Take up thy bed and walk? And he that was healed wist not who it was, for Jesus had conveyed himself away, a multitude being in that place. Afterward, Jesus findeth him in the temple, and said unto him, Behold, thou art made whole. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come unto thee. It's an odd thing to say, right? Because a couple of verses ago he said, Rise up, take up thy bed, and walk. And there he goes, he's on the Sabbath, he's going to get in trouble for holding his bedroll. But what has happened now is that this man has gone to the temple. He has gone to the church, and he has began a greater walk in faith, and Christ sees him and says, Now you're made whole. Well, what was missing, right? He's at the pool, and Jesus walks up, and he's like, I believe I can get there, but I don't have anybody to drag me to the pool. I know what happens when I get to the pool, but I don't have anybody to get me there. And where does Jesus encounter him? In the church. This guy did something that he should have done. I have been touched. I have been cleansed. I need to join. I need to be a part of this body and find out more what this is all about. And who touched me? Because they ask him, who did this? And he's like, I don't really know. It was a hit and run. He touched me, he healed me, and then he went. This guy had the opportunity to be like, well, good for me. That's not what he chose to do. And in that he got more. He became whole. We're going to, if you want to put your little Bible ribbon here, we're going to come back because Jesus gives us a key after that as he's being tried by these leaders of the Jewish church about why he can heal people on the Sabbath. That is part of faith. Let us go to Luke 7. So far we have two very interesting ways that faith is born, right? Those who come kicking and screaming into the place of God. Those who have a faith but don't quite really, someone else has got to. And then once someone else has got to, well, let's see what happens there. We're going to get two in this one. We're going to get two examples of faith in Luke 7. Now, when he had ended all his saying in the audience of the people, he entered into Capernaum. And a certain centurion's servant who was... Actually, I want to go to Mark. Sorry, that's the wrong place. I want to go to Mark first. Let's go to Mark first. Mark 5. I apologize. I got to build this in the right order, otherwise it's not going to be nearly as good. I promise. Mark 5. And when Jesus was passed over again and by the ship unto the other side, much people gathered unto him, and he was nigh unto the sea, and behold, there cometh one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and when he saw him, he fell at his feet. He besought him greatly, saying, My little daughter lieth at the point of death. I pray thee, come and lay hands on her, that she may be healed, and she shall live. And Jesus went with him, and much of the people followed him and thronged him. So our first guy we have here is whatever's going to go on with Jairus. And he's before Christ because he's heard of these things, and he's a leader of the synagogue. He's a leader of the Jewish mainstream religion, and yet he still knows that Christ has power. And he's come here to ask Christ to come and touch his daughter so that she can be made whole. And along the way, a certain woman, which had an issue of blood 12 years, and had suffered many things of many physicians, had spent all that she had, and was nothing bettered, but rather grew worse. When she had heard, Jesus came in the press behind and touched his garment. For she said, If I may touch but his clothes, I shall be whole. And straightway the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of that plague. This woman knows that she needs to touch Jesus in some way, right? Here she is, and for 12 years she's gone from doctor to doctor, and it says that she suffered at the hands of these physicians. But when she heard what Jesus was capable of, she said, if I can just barely touch him, I'll be made whole. And lo and behold, she's right. She gets in the throng, she touches him, and instantly, something that was around for 12 years is dried up. And Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that virtue had gone out of him, turned him about in the press and said, Who touched my clothes? And his disciples said unto him, Thou seest the multitude thronging thee, and sayest, Who touched me? And he looked round about to see her that had done this thing. But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what was done in her, came and fell down before him, and told him all the truth. And he said unto her, Daughter, thy faith hath made thee whole. Go in peace, and be whole of thy plague. This woman gets a beautiful touch from Jesus. And her faith, her act of faith, is her knowing that she just has to touch the hem of his garment. We've got a guy by a pool that knows that divine power is there, and he can be touched. But he says, I need a man to drag me. This woman says, I can come and just barely touch Christ, and he will solve my one singular solitary issue. He touches her, and in this massive crowd, Christ is, who did that? And everyone around him is like, how can you measure that? How can you find that out? And he looks at her and he says, your faith has made you whole. We have three different things, right? We talk about church being faith and all these people that are around. The first lady dragged out of a bed to this place to be stoned, and that's one way to come to Christ, I guess. It's really, right? I'm thankful that really hasn't been, but you want to know what? If you stoned me for some other sins according to Moses' law, yeah, I'd have been, I can't say I'd have been really stoned, that'd be wrong to say, but man, I'd be dead, right? And then this other guy who's just withered who's withered and halt and can't move 5 feet before somebody else, who's reliant on someone else to get him there. And yet, once he is healed, he wants to grow in the walk. This woman, I just need to touch him. And yet we haven't finished with Jairus yet, right? Jairus still has a daughter who is dying. And he says that this man is the guy who can do it. Whilst he yet spake, there came from the ruler of the synagogue's house certain which said, Thy daughter is dead. Why troublest thou the master any further? As soon as Jesus heard that was spoken, he saith unto the ruler of the synagogue, Be not afraid, only believe. And he suffered no man to follow him, save Peter and James and John and the brother of James. And he cometh to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and seeth the tumult, and them that wept and wailed greatly. And when he was come in, he saith unto them, Why make ye this ado and weep? The damsel is not dead, but sleepeth. And they laughed him to scorn. Some faith, huh? That's some faith that this guy is the leader of the synagogue, right? He's the leader of that church, and he says Jesus is the guy that can do this. Jesus heals this woman, and immediately after, why come? She's dead. And all the time, Jesus is like, no, she sleeps. Just believe. He gets there, same situation, and what is he met with? Scorn. He's met with these people saying, no, it's too late. You could have healed her when she was alive, but not while she's dead. It's not how any of this works. But when he had put them all out, he taketh the father and the mother of the damsel, and them that were with him, and entereth in where the damsel was lying. And he took the damsel by the hand, and said unto her, Talitha cumi, which is, being interpreted, Damsel, I say unto thee, arise. And straightway the damsel arose and walked, for she was of the age of 12, and they were astonished with a great astonishment. And he charged them straitly that no man should know it, and commanded that something should be given her to eat. See, the other thing about faith is that it needs to be fed, right? There was something about that man at the pool of Bethesda that after he's healed without touching the water, he goes to a place where he can be fed. This woman, who needs to touch the hem of his garment, knows how she can be fed. She can be fed even at touching the clothes of Jesus. And yet Jairus, leader of the synagogue, who is, Christ can do it. Christ can't do it. Right? It's different here, though. This one is different because wouldn't you expect him to be like, Jairus, go forth to all the world and tell everyone what has happened to Talitha? Yeah? No. Not what happens. Well, why? I'm going to suppose here that those people who came, right, they came to this house to see this girl and to do nothing. They could do nothing for her, but the thing that they did was scorn the one that could do something for her. Who is he? Who is he immediately going to tell and talk to? Right? And what is he going to say that her walking out of that room and out of that house wouldn't say to the rest of the world? Please come to my house. My name is Jairus. I would like to tell you all about Jesus. Jesus raised my daughter from the dead. That's beautiful. It's wonderful. But can you imagine that his daughter walks out of a room to the same people that are like, no. I know that the leader of our religion says that you're the guy to do it, but we say no. Wow. It's not the place that I want to be attending a service. It's a place where the people say to the leadership, we're not going to trust you on this one. We've got this. And in fact, it takes this beautiful thing, and Christ says, keep it. Keep it as a blessing unto yourself. Meanwhile, this woman who's been bleeding for 12 years is just so anxious to touch just a piece of Christ for herself. Let's look at a man that Christ says that there was no greater faith found. Luke 7. This is when we'll go to Luke 7. Now when he had ended all his saying into the audience of the people, he entered into Capernaum, and a certain centurion's servant, who was dear unto him, was sick and ready to die. And when he heard of Jesus, he sent unto him the elders of the Jews, beseeching him that he would come and heal his servant. And when they came to Jesus, they besought him instantly, saying that he was worthy for whom he should do this, for he loveth our nation, and he hath built us a synagogue. Then Jesus went with them. So this guy, let's talk about this guy first. This guy's a pretty powerful guy. He's in charge of a lot of things. And his servant, it's not his friend, it's not his child, it's his servant. It's something that he could probably replace like that because of who he was. This man is dying, and this man wants to make intercession. He says, I heard of this Jesus, and I know he can solve this. And so what does he do? He uses his earthly prowess to try and move this. He goes to the leader of the synagogue and said, take your guys and go bid this man to come. And he does. And these mighty men of religion, that you need to come. This man is worthy of what you're going to do for him because he loves our nation and he's built us a church. He is worthy. That's a nice vote of confidence, isn't it? It's a beautiful thing for people to say. Then Jesus went with them, and when he was now not far from the house, the centurion sent friends to him, saying unto him, Lord, trouble not thyself, for I am not worthy that thou shouldest enter under my roof. Wherefore neither thought I myself worthy to come unto thee, but say in a word, and my servant shall be healed. For I am a man set under authority, and having under me soldiers, and I say unto one, Go, and he goeth, and to another, Come, and he cometh, and to my servant, Do this, and he doeth it. When Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him, and turned him about, and said unto the people that followed him, I say unto you, I have not found so great a faith, no, not in Israel. What? This guy, this powerful guy, has the people go and say, this guy is worthy, come. And somewhere in the middle of it, this guy sends his friends. And what is the message that he sends with his friends? I'm not worthy for you to come here, but I know you can still touch this situation. And the reasoning that he gives, although worldly, is completely spiritual. He says, look, I'm a guy that has a lot of power and authority. And when I tell people to jump, they say, how high? I send them out and they go and they do it. And you know what I'm about? I'm about war. You can do the same thing, Christ. This guy's not even here. This guy is living this example of what he believes. He has told someone to do something so he can stay with his friend. And they have come to Christ and said, please don't come. But it's not because he doesn't want you to come. He says, you can do it right here. Christ turns around and says, I've found no greater faith in all of Israel. Well, the woman, right? We can track it back. Let's track it back to the guy at the pool. Don't we want his faith? Don't we want his faith to be like, whatever that miraculous divine thing is, the turning of the water, if I can just get there, right? Like that sounds like a good piece of faith. But he says, I've got no man to drag me to the water. Faith isn't about someone dragging you to the water. It's not something about kicking and screaming, although that's how we have to get here sometimes. And that woman who touched his garment, right, was for herself. And a beautiful thing, and we all need to touch Christ sometimes to get that instantly. And Jairus, who's like, oh, I know you can do it. Oh, but it's too late. This guy gets it. And Christ says he gets it more than anybody else in Israel. Because it's not about one singular sole thing. It's not about one point. It's about all the points. This line here, for I also am a man set under authority, having under me soldiers, and I say unto one, go, and he goeth, and to another one, come, and he cometh. Christ's power does not stop at one single thing or one single event. And it's not solely spent on the individual. And this is that man's faith. His faith says that Christ, you've got a whole bunch of things at your disposal. Right? But he's wandering around with 12 people. He's got an angel who he's seen to come fit and touch the water periodically. Those are all beautiful things, but this man knew something about Christ's heart that a lot of these other people didn't see. We can read time and time again in the Bible that he talks about these hordes of angels that he has and this army at his disposal. And it's true. And it's very true. We heard Reverend Jim talk on Wednesday about where Pastor is now. And he's in a place that they India, the dark continent, right? I mean, go back in literature and it's this mysterious place, and he talked about serpents and floating on carpets and all these things. Yeah, that guy's wandering around that place right now with all that stuff happening. Right? And he didn't stop and say, let me think about it, right? In fact, he made the decision before anybody else talked to him about it. And it's a beautiful, fantastic thing because that's faith. Amen. To go halfway around the world and say, this guy that I rarely talk to is going to help this out. And this little, count them up, folks, count us up. Go ahead. That guy just met with the president of a country. Yeah. And his wife, who was stand here and talked about her being a little girl from Plant City. This centurion had to come up through the ranks somehow. And what he learned coming up through the ranks, he used. And he didn't forget. He says that, you know what? I see this here. I can tell this thing to do this, and it's going to do that, and this other thing to do this, and it's going to do that, because I know I have that faith because I've been there. In Christ, you've got even more. I just got to ask. And it doesn't start with, those guys, he built the church. He's a nice guy. Let's have it. In fact, he sends out the people that he loves and says, tell him not to waste his time, but he can do it right there. He doesn't even have to come here. Just speak. And the reward for that is, he says, no greater faith. Not a single person in Israel understood how this works better than this guy. That it's not about just one thing. It's about all things. And all the time and anywhere and any place. And they that were sent, returning to the house, found the servant whole that had been sick. Let's go back to John 5. We're going to pick up right after the man with a withered hand who had been withered is in the synagogue in 15. The man departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus which had made him whole. And therefore did the Jews persecute Jesus and sought to slay him because he had done these things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, my Father worketh hitherto, and I work. Therefore the Jews sought the more to kill him. And before I read this next piece, let's go ahead and do a little participation Sunday. Anybody ever say that they were a son or daughter of God? Anyone? Oh, you're all in trouble. If you've read ahead, especially, you're in trouble. Because he not only had broken the Sabbath, but said also that God was his Father, making himself equal with God. Yeah. I'm going to pause here. I'm not going to blaspheme anything. Don't be worried. I've rehearsed this time and time again in my head because this is a tightrope, right? Because this is what it says. Christ says, I'm here to do my Father's work, and he works with me. And they said, you know what? That can't be right. You can't say that you're the Son of God because that makes you like a man, and then you're going to end up and you're like his equal because you're a man. That can't possibly be. And Christ wraps it up so beautifully in these verses. Then answered Jesus and said unto them, verily, verily, I say unto you, the Son can do nothing of himself, but what he seeth the Father do. For what things soever he doeth, these also doeth the Son likewise. Man, it sounds a lot like the centurion and what he said through his friends to Jesus. I'm a man and I've experienced these things, and because I've experienced them, I know them to be true. Christ said the same thing here. I don't just do these things on my own. I do them because God has done them. And because God has done them, I know that I can do them. But it's still all through him. For the Father loveth the Son, and showeth him all things that himself doeth, and he will show him greater works than these, that ye may marvel. For as the Father raiseth up the dead, and quickeneth them, even so the Son quickeneth whom he will. These are beautiful things. And we are so blessed, right, that Pastor is the right guy. We know it. We've been around Pastor for years. The sacrifice, the time, the gifts, it's all there. And every time he says, it's not me, it's Jesus. And Jesus says here, it's not me, it's God. But Jesus said, I had to see God do these things before I could do them. And he's going to let me do them because he loves me. And Pastor has said the same thing about every work and everything that he has done. You know what? It's not me, but it's Jesus, and Jesus has done it, so I know that Jesus will do it through me. And you want to know what the next step is? It's supposed to be us. And that's why, right, when we talk about these past 2 weeks, it's been interesting, right? And it's been growing us in ways that I don't know that we thought we should grow, right? Because the gal from Plant City and the shepherd of this church, global political religious leader icon award president of India. It doesn't make sense, but it makes total sense. And so what does that leave here? When he goes, do we not think that he would bless us? That anything less would be here? Because the simple fact is that even if I don't have faith as great as Pastor, or as great as Jesus, or the centurion, or anything else, we've been here and we've seen that, and we need to expect those things because Jesus did those things because God let him. Amen. That's what the centurion says. He says, here it is, Christ. I know you work all things everywhere with just a word because that's how it works. Amen. Right? And there it is. There is the peace that begins to be faith. And in this verse 21, for as the Father raiseth up the dead and quickeneth them, even so the Son quickeneth whom he will. What is he talking about there? We read a lot of things about a lot of dead people, but he's not talking about them literal being dead. Amen. He's talking about our faith. He's saying that God quickens the faith, and you know what? I, as Jesus, will quicken your faith as well. Amen. And I saw a meme somewhere. It was actually about a stock that wasn't moving all day, and somebody had posted it. It was a man with a stick poking a dog, and was like, is it alive? Right? This is the what's not written here is the important piece of our faith. We've walked through a lot of ways to see faith. Totally void, being drug into a church, kicking and screaming, only to be met with not getting stoned, being made whole. We've seen another faith that's like, oh, I need a man to drag me there, otherwise it's never going to touch me. Then we've seen another woman that's just like, I just need a piece of his garments. And then we see this guy that's like, you can do it wherever, whenever, because you've got the power. And in each one of those, Christ says he can quicken that spirit. He can quicken that faith. I don't want him to poke me with a stick and be like, you there? What's going on? Huh? Because you got to put yourself in the shoes. Let's put ourselves in the immediate shoes. What if it was you? What if you got the phone call to say, hey, the president of Australia would like you to come down under. Yeah, we saw a movie with an Australian accent. I picked it. Would like you to come down under and talk to the people about something to do with Jesus. Yeah, God, let's go. Yeah? Really? Really? Not so much. I start working 3 days. It would have been good 4 weeks ago. Yeah, I could have gotten on a plane. What happens to my life? Or when you're there and you're met with someone who's feeble, right? Or bleeding for 12 years. And you're confronted with that, and oh, here's the man or woman, son or daughter of God. Yeah, oh, me. You're talking about me. Wake up, Faith. Now's the time. And it has nothing. The beauty of this piece of faith is that it has everything to do with Christ and so little to do with us. Because even that guy at the pool was like, I just need someone to drag me to the pool. I know when I get to the pool, I'm going to be good. But I need someone to drag me there. It's funny. I gave the prop department the weekend off. It was good. For the Father judgeth no man, but hath committed all judgment unto the Son, that all men should honor the Son, even as they honor the Father. He that honoreth not the Son, honoreth not the Father, which hath sent him. It says that all these things, right, this quickening of the Spirit and all these things that faith works, it all goes back to the honor to Jesus, and Jesus in turn gives the honor back to God. So it's not about a person or a thing, it's about Him. And you see Him walking this earth and in our own lives, right? Because He says we've had to see these things. Again, Reverend Jim on Wednesday night, right? Who He was before and what He is now, and the recent trials and tribulations that you want pain? We'll give you pain. But there was a way through the pain. This woman bleeding for 12 years, I've just got to touch him. This guy who didn't have to care about his servants because he was replaceable. His heart was moved in proxy for something and someone else. And the world wanted to do it their way. Oh, he's a good guy. Come do something good for the good guy. And he sent his friends and said, you know what? That was wrong. You have this power. And you can do it from wherever you are. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that heareth my word, and believeth on him that sent me, hath everlasting life, and shall not come into condemnation, but is passed from death unto life. James 2. Hallelujah, Jesus. 14. What doth it profit, my brethren, though a man say he hath faith and have not works? Can faith save him? If a brother or a sister be naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you say unto them, depart in peace, be warmed and filled, notwithstanding you give them not those things which are needful to the body, what doth it profit? Yeah, that's some churches. That's some walks. That's some faiths. Brother, sister, Jesus will bless you. Have a great day. It's not what this church has been about at all, ever, period. And it's not been about the drawing onto, oh, look what this church can do, because it's not the church, it's the faith. And the beautiful thing is that it's led through a wonderful pastor that is so filled and so ready to give those things. Amen. But he talks about here is that, what if a brother or a sister comes to you and says, I'm naked or I need food? It doesn't say what happens when it goes to the pastorate, right? Or when it goes to Jesus directly. It's talking directly about faith. And you say, God bless. Even so, faith, if it hath not works, is dead, being alone. This is for us, brethren, for who knows what's ahead. Right? Tuesday, Pastor gets back. And he flies back in the morning. And I know he canceled 4th of July. But he has asked that everybody come to the house who wants to at 7. And if you need the address, we'll get you the address to kind of go over kind of some of the next things. The next things. And I don't know what he's talked about the next things, and frankly, I've got a lot of growing to do and a lot of faith, and it was so wonderful to talk to him because he sounded like he was 20 years old again, I think, even though I didn't know my dad when he was 20, right? He's there, and he said something interesting. He said, the man that he's with, Dr. VJ, is is a wonderful man because he dreams and has been given big visions for big things. And we're people, right? And we've heard Pastor talk about his natural brothers and the work that he has done in those lives to bring Christ to them. Dr. VJ, in Pastor's voice right now, is more of a brother to Pastor than any natural brother could ever be. They sound like they're going to go gallivanting across the globe, just tearing it up, y'all, just tearing it up. And what a beautiful thing, right? The faith that has to be given to that man, and that man has to work under, to say, yeah, take me now. And his wife, that gal from Plant City, and she talks about it, to stand before these people. Tremendous. Faith with works. Amen. Not dead. But he's got to build our faith. And he builds our faith through saying, we've seen it. We've seen what can happen. Period. And I am so blessed that in that absence, those things continue. Not to the scale, because God knows I don't have that faith yet all the way. I know, I've seen, and I can expect. I can stand here and pray, and I can say, he can do it. He absolutely can. But unless he intercedes for my faith, it ain't going to happen at this point, folks. It's not. But it is happening because he loves us. Because just like Jesus didn't have to drag the man to the water. He just had to touch him. He's touched each and every one of us. He has built and perpetuated our faith continually. And that can't be void whether I'm here or not, or you're here or not. Because whoever is here, there will be a brother and a sister who says, I am naked or I'm hungry. Because you want to know what? I bet that woman in that adulterous bed, I bet she was naked. And she had to be dragged kicking and screaming and had to be met with something, and was met with Christ. That man at the pool whose faith, right? Let's talk about that. That woman lying in a bed. That man lying down. These other two standing up. Our faith doesn't have to be lied there to be poked and prodded. It is there to be running and ambulatory and moving for Christ. And that is our sermon.